Hey everybody, welcome to the video from my core plays for week 14 of the NFL season over on DraftKings. And if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out and I really do appreciate it. And while you're at it, you might as well hit that notification bell as well so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. And YouTube tells me around 50% of the people watching these videos have not yet subscribed. So if you're a frequent visitor to the channel or if you're just new and you like what you see, consider that subscribe button because it really helps the channel grow. And that's obviously going to help me out as well. If you want to follow me over on social media, handles on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. If you want to support the channel over on Patreon, link is down below for that. I think that's it for the plug. So without further ado, let's get into this week's Core Plays video. Alright, and leading us off with core play number 1 is Davante Adams here at $9,300. And I gotta be honest, it was a real struggle this week picking between either Derrick Henry or Davante Adams, as both are in smash spots, both are totally viable. Just comes down to your preferred roster construction. And personally for me this week, it's spending up for Davante Adams over Derrick Henry. And there's a couple of reasons why. And one, this is a PPR site on DraftKings, which is going to value guys that catch the ball a little bit more. And Derrick Henry really doesn't do any of that whatsoever, less than 2 targets per game and less than a 7.5% target share. Meanwhile, Davante Adams, we'll get into his numbers in a little bit, but they're absolutely insane this season. Plus, Derrick Henry is a bit touchdown dependent and game script dependent, and we saw that last week versus the Cleveland Browns where he busted pretty hard in a very expensive price tag. And I'm not saying the Tennessee Titans are going to go down 30 points in this game like they did last week versus Cleveland in the first half, but if it happens, I mean, there's a very outside shot of that happening, but if it does, Derrick Henry has a good chance of busting because he's not going to catch 8 to 10 balls, a bunch of dump offs. That's not his role in that offense. So there's a little bit of concern there if that happened to happen, although I don't think that's going to happen versus Jacksonville. I'm not saying he's a bad play by any means. He's the 1B to Davante Adams 1A this week. It's just if I had to pick between the two, it's going to be Davante Adams for me, and there's many reasons why. It's just a fantastic matchup versus Detroit. He goes off pretty much each and every single week. Now, the only concern here is that they are 9-point favorites, so if this game happens to get out of hand, maybe they're not throwing the ball too much in the second half, late in the third quarter, or in the fourth quarter. But if that's the case, I'm assuming Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers already did their jobs, kind of similar to the San Francisco game on a Thursday night about a month or so ago, when they were facing the 49ers on Thursday Night Football, when they had pretty much all their players on the COVID list. Adams, I mean, they killed the 49ers pretty early on, but he had around 40 DraftKings points in that game, close to 200 receiving yards, and he got there, even though they did blow out the 49ers in that game. So even if they did in this one, I still think he's going to be fine here. They have the highest implied team total on the slate at nearly 32 points, just south of that at 31.75. And it's also the highest over-under game of the week at 54.5 points. So a lot of points should be scored in this game, and it's a fantastic matchup versus Detroit. They're 28th DVA versus the pass this season, and they're also 23rd versus wide receivers. So it's a great spot for Davante Adams. They have a banged-up secondary. I'm not really sure who's going to be able to stop him. He's averaging 0.32 targets per route ran this season, close to 0.8 fantasy points per route ran, and over 3 yards per route ran, all lead the entire league. 33% target share in the season, which leads all wide receivers, close to a 40% market share of the team's air yards, over a receiving touchdown per game. Like, the guy scores each and every single week, close to 11 targets per game, and over 100 receiving yards as well. So you guys don't really need me to tell you that Davante Adams is a good play, but the numbers back it up. The matchup is fantastic. Now, if you're looking back to week 2, where he did bust versus Detroit as one of the highest owned plays on the entire slate, might have actually been the highest owned play on the slate. Can't remember exactly. That was about 12 weeks ago, but you got to keep in mind, he did get hurt in that game. He missed the next month or so of games, and they were already winning that game by quite a bit, so they didn't really need his services in the second half anyway, so I'm going to throw that out the window. So if you throw that out, really the only game he had a bad game and he still scored around 12 fantasy points was versus Tampa Bay, when the Packers only scored 10 offensive points. So I'm expecting a big outing here from Davante Adams, and I'm sure most of you are as well, but I have a lot of confidence in him here, and I don't mind building around him as my core piece this week. All right, moving on to core play number 2 is the first running back we're going to talk about. And I'm sure a lot of you are cringing right now seeing David Montgomery on your screen. David Montgomery has a lot of haters. I've noticed that because last week I had him on my core plays video at $5,500, and there was quite a few comments saying they were not playing David Montgomery. So if they didn't like him at $5,500 versus Detroit, they're sure not going to like him at $6,500 versus Houston. But it's another good spot here. And with the way this slate is, I actually think he's one of the better point per dollar options at the running back position. It's just such a good matchup, and he's gotten a lucky draw of matchups recently. The past 3 weeks, he has faced Detroit, Green Bay, and Houston. Those are 3 of the worst run defenses in football, so I think the good times continue here for David Montgomery because he's been doing really good the past 2 weeks. I think we're around 20 DraftKings. No, he had about 30 DraftKings points the past 2 weeks, not combined, each of those weeks. So I would not be surprised if he gets around 100 total yards in this one, catches a couple balls, and probably is going to find the end zone because he's really the only running back that's going to get touches in this backfield. Now, Cordell Patterson kind of gets some touches as well, had a rushing touchdown last week, but for the most part, David Montgomery should dominate these snaps and the touches. And the matchup versus Houston, like I said, is absolutely excellent. They're allowing over a rushing touchdown per game, 140 rushing yards, 32.8 DraftKings points per game, and they're 27th DVA versus the pass, close to 50 receiving yards and 5 catches per game as well. And Montgomery is a capable pass catcher. They do use him through the air, so even if they did fall behind in this game, he could get some short checkdowns and pay off that way. But on the season, around a 12% target share, over 4 targets per game, and about 15 carries per game as well. He might not be the best running back in the world, but the volume's going to be there. The matchup is excellent, and he's proved he can do well in good matchups the past 2 weeks, so I'm going to buy in on him here. Now, they are 2-point dogs, which really isn't too much of a factor here. That should be a pretty close back-and-forth game. Not expecting it to be a high-scoring game. It is Chicago and Houston. Now, Houston has Deshaun Watson, so he could always go off, but without Will Fuller, that offense certainly takes a hit, and their offensive line is pretty rough, and they're facing a pretty good defense in Chicago. But either way, I do think David Montgomery can have another solid game. Maybe not getting 30 points 3 weeks in a row, but I think he could definitely get around 100 total yards and find the end zone once or maybe even twice if we're lucky. All right, moving on to core play number 3 or 3.5, whatever you want to call it. I am cheating a little bit listing 2 players here, but since they're on the same team, I thought it would make sense to group them together. But it's the Panthers wide receiver group with Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel. Both, I think, are fantastic plays here with Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore being out. Now, I know Christian McCaffrey being out is nothing new. He's been out for the majority of the season. I believe he's only played 3 games this year, but still, it helps things with him being out. Because if he was in, he's probably going to get close to 10 targets. So when he's out, it's obviously going to help things a little bit. Plus, DJ Moore's out, which is kind of the big reason that I like both of these guys. That's going to really condense this offense to either being Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, or Mike Davis out of the backfield. And on the season, DJ Moore has over a 40% market share of the team's AR, which is near the tops of the league, a 63% weighted opportunity share, and a 22.8% target share. So when you wipe that out of an offense, it's definitely going to change some things. So, I mean, I think Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel are in an excellent spot here. I feel like they're both a little bit too cheap. On the season, Robbie Anderson, we'll start talking about him first just because he's a little bit more expensive. Or by a little bit, I mean $1,000. But he's got a 26% target share in the season and a 36% market share of the team's air yards. So in this game, I would not be surprised if he sees over a 30% target share, maybe close to a 70% weight opportunity share, and probably around a 40% market share of the team's air yards. And as for Curtis Samuel, he's a lot cheaper, so I think he's going to be one of the most popular plays on the entire slate. I would assume Curtis Samuel is higher owned than Robbie Anderson just because of the price difference, but I think both are absolutely excellent plays. But I would say if I had to pick one, it would be Curtis Samuel just because of the price, and I feel like they can both put up similar points here. But on the season, Curtis Samuel, he's sitting at a 17.4% target share and only a 15% market share of the team's air yards. I think he'd get a couple of rushing attempts as well with Christian McCaffrey being out. We saw that a few times this season, but both are in excellent spots here. Now, the matchup versus Denver, on paper, it's going to look pretty gross because they've had one of the better pass defenses in football this season. They're actually 50th versus the pass and allowing the 9th fewest points per game to the wide receiver position. But a couple things to keep in mind, they're going to be without their 2 top corners in Bryce Callahan and AJ Boye, so that's obviously going to open up some things for these wide receivers. Now, they still have some pretty good safeties, so I don't think it's going to be an absolute cakewalk here. But when you're down your top 2 corners, it's definitely going to soften things up a little bit. So Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, given the circumstances in this game with injuries on the Broncos secondary or suspensions, and with injuries to their offense or guys on COVID, I think they're going to be a real nice spot here to pay off their price points. All right, moving on to our 4th core play. It's the second running back we're going to talk about. And funny enough, I don't even care what he does as a running back. I'm mostly concerned about his pass catching ability. And there should be a lot of that in this game versus the San Francisco 49ers. So I'm sure most of you know, but Antonio Gibson is going to be out for this game. He's the main running back on this team. So it's going to be the Peyton Barber and the J.D. McKissic show. Now, I know that's not the most exciting show in the world, but it's definitely going to be valuable for fantasy purposes just because of how involved J.D. McKissic is through the air. Now, Antonio Gibson only played 4 snaps in that last game before leaving the game with a turf toe injury. And McKissic ended up playing around 75% of the snaps, and assuming that's a similar snap share of what he's going to get in this game, he should be able to easily pay off his $4,100 price tag. Now, before Gaskin got ruled with COVID and out for this game about an hour ago, he was going to originally be the running back here listed instead of J.D. McKissic, but since he's out, we obviously can't play him, so I'm going to lean more towards J.D. McKissic at a cheaper price point. Plus, he's great for a site over on DraftKings because this PPR scoring. And I would not be surprised if he gets close to 10 targets in this game. He's kind of a perfect fit with Alex Smith because Alex Smith is a check down Charlie. He loves checking down to his running backs. And since Alex Smith has been the starting quarterback for this team, J.D. McKissic actually has the highest target share on the team. So definitely a lot of value to be had here on the season. He's just shy of a 20% target share, over 6 targets per game, close to 5 catches per game, and a 31% weighted opportunity share. So I think this is a pretty good spot to play J.D. McKissic with Antonio Gibson being out. Now, the 49ers, they've been pretty tough on running backs this season. They're allowing the 6th fewest points per game in their 10th DVA versus the run. But the Washington football team, they are 2.5-point dogs here. So if they are trailing this game near the end of the third quarter, fourth quarter. It could be a lot of checkdowns to J.D. McKissic. Again, don't really care what he does on the ground. I'm mostly just concerned about all the checkdowns he's going to get, because if he gets, like, I don't know, anywhere from 7 to 10 catches in this game, say around 50, 70 yards, and maybe 20 or 30 yards on the ground, that's going to be good enough for us on a PPR site below $5,000. So I do think it's a very solid play on this slate. All right, moving on to our fifth and final core play of a cheap Jets wide receiver here in Breshad Perriman at $3,900. Now, it doesn't feel that great rostering a Jets player, but there's several factors working in his favor this weekend. So let's just start off with the fact that Denzel Mims is going to be out for this game. And the big reason that's a boost for Breshad Perriman is that they're kind of similar receivers, as in they are both deep threats on the season. Denzel Mims has a 40% market share of the team's air yards, 66% weighted opportunity share, and a 25% target share, also an 8 out of 16. Meanwhile, Breshad Perriman has somewhat similar numbers with a 30% market share of the team's air yards, an 8 out of 15.5, a 48% weighted opportunity share, and only a 17.8% target share. But the main thing there was that they're both down the field threats, and when you take Denzel Mims out of the equation, Breshad Perriman's just going to completely slide into that role. And also, the big thing is that Jamison Crowder might miss this game. He popped up on the injury report late in the week, did not practice on Friday. We have no more news to report on that, but it sounds like he's trending in the wrong direction, because usually it's not a good sign when you pop up on the injury report late in the week. So assuming he misses this game, you have to take out around a 25% target share in that offense, and also a 20% market share of the team's air yards. He's more of the possession wide receiver with an 8 out of 8.3, but if you take out Denzel Mims and Jamison Crowder out of the equation, we're left with guys like Breshad Perriman, who's not a terrible wide receiver. I think if he was in a better situation, I think he would actually put up some pretty strong numbers. And someone like Braxton Berrios in the slot, who Sam Darnold definitely likes targeting the slot wide receiver, so I think he definitely has value. And I know I wish it was Joe Flacco throwing Breshad Perriman the ball over Sam Darnold, because Joe Flacco is more likely to go deep than Sam Darnold is, but he certainly has value here versus the worst secondary in the league versus wide receivers this season. Seattle was dead last, allowing the most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position at 50.7 DraftKings points per game, 225 receiving yards, and they're 29th DVA versus the pass. Plus, the Jets are 13.5 point dogs on the road, so it should be a pass-heavy game script, and I would not be surprised that Breshad Perriman ends up having a pretty strong game in this one at only $3,900. He doesn't have to do too much, and I think he can easily pay off his price point. And with that being said, guys, that's going to be it for this video. So I hope it was helpful. If it was, make sure to leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. If you want to follow me over on social media, I'm at ChrisPennell16 on Twitter, CPenn16 over on IG, and if you want to support the channel over on Patreon, always much appreciated. I put a ton of work each and every single week in these videos and my spreadsheets that I build every week for you guys. So if you're interested, links down below for that. It's $10 a month. So it's a bunch of information on there that I do think is very useful heading into the weekend. Plus, you can hop into the Discord chat as well. But before I keep talking, I'm going to get out of here. I hope you guys enjoy Football Sunday, and I'll see you guys in the next video.